Welcome to Optimize 24, the thought leadership event of AspenTech. Now we have with us Don Busiek, who is the Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Asset Performance Management Unit at AspenTech. Don, welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate you letting me be here.
Just to get us going, to kick off, it'd be worth asking, how does AspenTech describe this all broad encompassing process of APM?
Yeah, it's a really good question. First, I'd say we define it the right way. But more seriously, look, the way the market typically defines it is really predictive maintenance, right? So this idea that I can tell you when your assets are going to fail, and I can tell you the steps to take to kind of resolve that failure, to maintain the equipment. That's the classic definition. But I think, quite honestly, it's not big enough. It's not broad enough, right? I think you have to look at it a little more encompassing. So think about the process. Typically, an asset isn't standalone. So you have to be able to look at the entire process. How is each asset interconnected? What if I change the ingredients? What if I change the temperature? How does that affect the overall process? That's part of the APM definition as well. And then finally, think about timing. Imagine I tell you the brakes on your car are going to fail, but I don't tell you when, I don't tell you how to fix it, I don't tell you which garage to take it to. All of those things need to be part of that APM definition. So the idea that I can tell you your boiler's going to fail, here's the time, here's the right time to do that maintenance because the right resources are available, I've got the inventory, et cetera. All of that is part of the APM definition. So it's much more holistic than I think the classic, simple, predictive maintenance only view.
One sector is feeling the heat way more than the others. It's seeing the approaching horizon. It needs to get its act together, and that's the oil and gas business. Yeah. How do they approach the APM horizon, and what are you witnessing out there in the market and the kind of solutions you're providing?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So there's a few elements. The first is everyone in the oil and gas sector has a dual challenge, right? You have to be profitable, but you also have to be sustainable. And that's the dual challenge. So how do you do that? Well, classically, and I'll tell you a story. My dad and my uncle, when they were old enough to drive, they pooled their money together and they bought a car together. That car was a Model T. Henry Ford's Model T was my dad's first car, right? Now, that's what I call simply iron, right? There's no software involved. There's no, it's a mechanical instrument. I don't know what kind of car you drive, but I bet it's got more software in it than my laptop, right? And so that just illustrates that in one person's lifetime, how much the world around us has changed. Now you take that to a refinery, to a factory, and you say, okay, let's look at the equipment that you had that was dumb iron before, that's not censored. Look at the new equipment you've added that's instrumented, that's IoT enabled. How do you put that together? Part of your plant has a Wi-Fi, part doesn't, et cetera. How do you put that together to have a comprehensive digital transformation journey? And that is the challenge that you have in the oil and gas sector. You've got this dual challenge. I have to produce more product. I have to do it more sustainably. But how do I do it in this environment where some of my equipment is my dad's Model T and some of my equipment is your Ferrari, right? That's the dual challenge that they have. And how do I do that in a way that makes sense?
Well, I'd wish it was a Ferrari, but you know what? I'll tell you what, there's a lot of wishing going on in the oil and gas sector as well. Yeah. They're facing a challenge or two. The targets are clear. The challenge is clear. The solutions providers such as yourself, your products are clear. You've got an amazing product suite to offer. The big question here is, what's holding the sector back?
Look, there's an evolution that's been happening specific to APM. The classic scenario is you roll out some new technology and people say, my God, this is so cool. I want to implement it for technology's sake. I can understand everything about the equipment. But really what's happening is this transformation to business value. And that's what we're seeing right now in oil and gas specifically, where customers are saying, oh, okay, APM is a really cool technology. How do I get business value out of it? And so what's holding us back is the idea that the operator, the VP of maintenance, the maintenance engineer, the reliability engineer, all of those people have to understand APM and get value from it. And that's tough as they're going through their own transformation, right? The industry is transforming, and you see this kind of workforce generational shift that's occurring as well, where, the maintenance engineer who's been at the refinery for the last 40 years, who knows to tap the pump twice on the side with a wrench to get it to work, that person's retiring. And there's a newer generation coming in who doesn't have that deep deep knowledge, but as a digital kind of generation. And so they're expecting solutions like, this will show my age, like Facebook, right? They're expecting solutions like that to help them. That's where APM comes in. So you have to be able to provide business value, but do it in a way that matches ultimately the end user. And I think that's the kind of personal challenge that every refinery is having right now.
You've given us some of the use cases. You've also very eloquently explained how APM comes into the big picture.
Yeah.
The one question to ask is, for the benefit of the viewers of this broadcast, is perhaps you could share a use case specific to a client that springs to your mind right now.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a bunch we can talk about. Look, we have a great energy company in Italy. I was just there last week, and we were talking about it. So their challenge was this: their maintenance costs were too high. Some of their refineries, they had outsourced the maintenance. Some they insourced it. They had a mixture of old equipment, new equipment, and they had to really drive down their maintenance costs. That's a central part of their company. And so for them, it was how quickly can they scale? They have 11 sites. How quickly could they scale APM across those 11 sites and immediately begin to see business value, reduce their inventory costs, reduce their spare parts, etc. Now, what we did was we deployed with them over the span of 7 months. So across 11 sites, 7 months, hundreds of assets. And they immediately started, because we had KPIs set up, driving that value that their maintenance workers were seeing, we immediately started to see a reduction in maintenance costs. So just by understanding how the equipment was being operated, where in their processes they could tinker with it to enhance production, made a huge value for them within the span of, like I said, less than a year. So there's a kind of a key example for you.
So I think it sets up nicely what I'm about to ask you next. When you engage with some of the clients that you tend to, you will encounter legacy estate.
Yeah.
Now, there is the new build, there's greenfield, there is brownfield, but you are advocating for APM. So what are the sort of risks that you encounter when you look at the holistic estate of the end client?
There's two ways I think clients look at risk. The first is the environment that you just described. I've got old equipment, new equipment, oftentimes in the same site. I've got Wi-Fi in some spots, not in others. Some assets are instrumented, some aren't. What do I do? How do I make that work? What assets do I prioritize first to run predictive maintenance? All of that is kind of a risk-based question that they have. Do I have the right resources to even be able to pull this off, right? All of those are their question. I think it is critical to sit down holistically across maintenance, reliability, operations, and digital, and look at all of that and map out success for them. How do you get to business value success in a short period of time across that landscape? That's the first kind of overall challenge. The second is cultural, right? And so that same client that I mentioned to you, 2 days earlier, I was at a different customer. And again, they've deployed to multiple sites in less than a year. But one of the sites, the plant manager said, listen, I don't believe in this digital stuff. I'm not interested in it. The old ways work great. So you have this cultural change that you have to go through. How do you convince some people the business value that they can get that comes from digital transformation? And the way I think about it is just, if you look at like the S&P 500, think about how fast the companies now in that S&P 500 are turning over. That's a result of digital. And so you have to be able to jump on that digital transformation train, or you risk getting passed by your competitor.
You talk about the oil and gas business, and we can look at it as somewhat of a traditional industry. But at the end of the day, the traditional industry is also changing its ways. It's looking at the approaching Alamo, and it's saying, well, we need to go down the digital pathway. Yeah. And a key component of the digital pathway is AI.
Yes.
It's machine learning. So how do you take what is a new age technology towards what is a rather traditional business?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because it covers kind of all of the aspects that we've just been talking about. So if you think about it this way, what most oil and gas companies have now is they have a digital team, a chief digital officer whose job it is to help drive that digital transformation. They're believers already, innately. you have to work with them to help them be successful. That's typically a champion. But you have to show, again, the operations team how they can drive business value. Now, the way I think about that is by saying, look, you use a set of tools today. You use Maximo for maintenance or SAP APM or Infor for maintenance. How do we integrate into their daily workflow? Allow them to spend more time maintaining equipment and less time looking at different software screens. And you do that by blending your APM solution in with their existing technology, in with their daily workflow. We do that by having joint dashboards. I mentioned Maximo, which is a very popular maintenance software. How do we join our dashboards with Maximo so that maintenance engineer is just looking in one screen instead of three? That's part of the solution, blending it in with their daily flow.
Talk of big data going to big oil or big gas, as seems to be then natural gas is the bridging fuel of the future. Talk big oil, big gas. In terms of some of the solutions that you're providing, what are the challenges that you encounter on the ground, especially when you're a front row seat, you go to some of these sites where you're providing solutions. So what are the challenges that you're noticing out in the market?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think the market had a lot of hype. You talked about it, AI, machine learning, big data, all these great buzzwords, a ton of hype, and everybody wants to do something with it. And the challenge is, how do you turn that hype into business value? Exactly. And so the way that works is really clearly defined goals with the customer. And it's a relationship, meaning we sit down together and we say, look, let's define what success looks like for you. Let's lay out those KPIs. Let's measure that success. And let's then implement the software along the lines of that success. But it takes the relationship, it takes working together to be successful. I think of APM and our customers like a family. And I think that's what matters. That's what customers want, because they know that we can each rely on each other.
You're talking about APM. You're telling them to temper their expectations. This is not about reinventing the wheel. It's about doing things better. So what do you think? We've heard a lot from you about how AspenTech sort of steps into the breach and assists these clients.
That's right.
Let me turn it around the other way. What do organizations need to do to have a more effective absorption of APM solutions that you provide?
I think any digital transformation right now is a challenge, because there's just so many things that are happening, right? Again, classic maintenance engineer says, I already have a full plate, right? I don't need more on my plate. And so from a challenge perspective, how do we help? What are their challenges? I think they have to look at a couple different things. They have to look at their resources. Do they have the right skills, the right resources to be able to undergo digital transformation? They have to look at their environment. Do they have the right environment? Are the assets instrumented? Are the assets instrumented with the right sensors to be able to pull the right data off? There's the culture aspect that we talked about. Do I have the right culture in place? Do I have a champion? That type of thing. And then what you really want to do is you want to start with a lighthouse. Have one site, one asset class, one area that you make successful, that everybody says, oh my God, I want that too. That's amazing. How did you reduce your maintenance cost by that much? That's incredible. That's what I want. And then that feeds one success, snowballs into the other. So I think the way you do your deployment to create a lighthouse of success first is critical to having a successful implementation.
To run up our discussion, I'm going to ask you a two-part question. Can't just let you go yet. And I think that two-part question goes such. If you're talking about the APM sphere, if you look at it, the here and the now, contrasted to how things are now, what was back then, say 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And secondly, to give us your thoughts, your final thoughts on what critical role APM plays when it comes to sustainability solutions.
If you just rewind the movie, right, and you look back to, say, the 80s, it was all about just-in-time maintenance. Something fails, and I go fix it, right? That's how it was in the 80s. In the 90s, we migrated to more maintenance software. And so now you start to say, every third Thursday, I'm going to do a visual inspection, and I'm going to change the oil on this and just make sure things are working. It's great, a step in the right direction, but yet still not kind of where we need to be. And there hasn't been a tremendous amount of evolution from that, let's say, condition-based, time-based maintenance until we started to come out with APM, until the assets could speak, right? And so you go from it's Thursday, I need to go do a visual inspection and change the oil, to, oh my God, that asset's going to fail in 3 weeks. I need to have the right inventory, right parts, the right downtime to be able to maintain it. That's where we are today. That's a massive change and a huge change in the cost structure. Because if I can do predictive maintenance, the amount of cost I have is dramatically less than, oh my God, the asset has failed. It's down. I need to quickly get it back up. But the cost structure is radically different. And so that's the compare and contrast. We went from it broke, I need to fix it, to time-based and condition-based maintenance, to now predictive maintenance, because the assets can talk. We need to hear them, right? And so that's part one. Part two of your question is around sustainability. Look, this is why I think the definition of APM needs to be broad, right? The first thought is when companies are thinking about carbon capture, they're designing new equipment, they're designing new factories, new plants to be able to handle things like carbon capture, right? How do I design that more sustainably? That's part of APM. Designing my lines, designing my refineries in a way that promotes sustainability. That's thought one. Thought two is kind of the bread and butter, which is I'm going to reduce emissions by simply reducing unplanned downtime, right? That's the second big component of APM. And the third, when we think about sustainability, it's about process. How do I tailor my process to reduce waste, right? And that's the third key component where APM makes a huge difference in sustainability.
Don, we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for your insight. That was Don Busiek, Senior Vice President, General Manager at APM Unit at AspenTech.